Oh no, I hope I don't fall. No.
Jason Tatum is a 25 point per game scorer. Jaylen Brown is a 25 point per game scorer. The Boston Celtics are under 500 and have a worse record than the Charlotte Hornets and the New York Knicks. What the is going on?
Celtics will receive 3 first-round picks, including one next year, which is one of the deepest projected drafts in over a decade. Boston also gets 5 players, including Gerald Wallace and Chris Humphries' expiring contract, as well as Marshawn Brooks.
In 2013, the Boston Celtics and the Brooklyn Nets agreed on a trade that would change the landscape of the conference and honestly, the entire league. The Boston Celtics agreed to send Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Jason Terry to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Chris Humphries, Gerald Wallace, Chris Joseph, Marshawn Brooks, and Keith Bogans, along with the Brooklyn Nets' first-round draft picks in 2014, 2016, 2018, and a pick swap in the 2017 NBA Draft. The Brooklyn Nets wanted to make a team to knock out the Miami Heat in the short term, while the Boston Celtics accepted that the Big Three's time in Boston was over, and it is time to move on from that era. And after the Brooklyn Nets era flopped really hard and really fast, Danny Ainge looked like an absolute genius for this trade, because this trade set up the Boston Celtics for having some of the most valuable assets in the league in those Nets picks, and they had their pick in 2016, 2017, and 2018. The Nets were garbage, and instead of them being able to use the NBA draft to gain young talented players, it would be the Boston Celtics that would reap the benefits off of the Nets' demise. This trade was supposed to set the Brooklyn Nets back by a decade, and the Celtics up for extreme success if they play their cards right. With these picks, the Boston Celtics could really outbid any team that's trying to sell their star players, or they could acquire some really talented players through the NBA draft and rack up top 5 picks year after year without tanking, as long as the Brooklyn Nets remain once again ass. And what became even more scary was that the Boston Celtics were making moves that would accelerate their rebuild exponentially on top of this trade. After the trade in 2013, yes, the Boston Celtics were not good at all the year after. However, they were able to hire one of the best college coaches in the nation in Brad Stevens going into the season, and were able to use their own draft pick to draft Marcus Smart in the year after. And after a trade deadline trade for Isaiah Thomas, the Boston Celtics were able to make it back into the playoffs in just 2 years. They would then build off this momentum and make the playoffs again the year after as a 48-win team. And it would be in the following offseason where the Brooklyn Nets trade would really start to kick in, as the Nets pick ended up being the 3rd overall pick in the 2016 NBA Draft, where the Boston Celtics would draft Jaylen Brown. And then the Celtics would end up being an attractive enough destination for one Al Horford to choose to sign with them on a max contract, who was one of the biggest free agents available that year. In 2017, Isaiah Thomas would have a career year. The Celtics would end up with the first seed in the conference and would make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. So in a span of 4 years since the original 2013 trade, the Boston Celtics have returned to the top of the Eastern Conference and really only have used one of those Nets picks. And in the 2017 offseason, Danny Ainge would look like a god. First, he trades down the draft and drafts Jason Tatum. Then they end up signing one of the most coveted free agents again. This time is Gordon Hayward, who's coming off a career year in Utah. And then they trade for Kyrie Irving by essentially giving the Cavs Isaiah Thomas and the remaining Nets pick. It looked like potential was becoming a reality, and the Boston Celtics were armed to be the juggernaut of the conference for the better part of the next decade. They were armed with one of the best GMs in the league, at the time the best young coach in the league, a 25-year-old elite point guard and arguable superstar that hasn't hit their prime yet, a 27-year-old all-star wing coming off a career year, one of the best stretch bigs in the league, the number 3 overall pick in the last 2 NBA drafts, and Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart to top it off. And the 2018 NBA season did nothing but scare the NBA even more and confirm everyone's fear. The Boston Celtics ended up losing Gordon Hayward in the first game of the season, but then they ended up going on a 16-game winning streak shortly after. Then later on in the season, they ended up losing Kyrie Irving as well, but then all of a sudden Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown step up in their absence, and they go all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and was 1 win away from a finals berth. So not only did the 2018 Boston Celtics live up to their expectations, they, if anything, given the context of the season, really exceeded people's expectations, both in terms of their season goals and how talented this team truly is. Because going into the season, the main attraction was a team being led by Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford, being coached by Brad Stevens. But for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart to show out like that wasn't in the picture of things for people who were already high on the Celtics to begin with. The Boston Celtics were supposed to be the perfect blend of talent that would dominate the league right after the Warriors' reign and also years beyond that. And if the Celtics were able to do that in year one, man, just imagine when Kyrie and Hayward come back.
They're bringing major signs.
22 shots, I should have shot 30. It really not great of a shoot.
A lot of the ball was in either Kyrie or Gordon Hayward's hand most of the time. So I feel like, either Terry Rozier is just in the corner or on the bench.
I've been the young guy, being a 22-year-old kid and, wanting everything right now. I got to adjust my game to this guy.
As far as any other year that I've been head coach, certainly been the most trying. I think I did a bad job. Like at the end of the day, like as a coach, if your team doesn't find its best fit together, that's on you.
2019 was the worst year as a Celtics fan because this was supposed to be our year. Maybe not win the championship, but it was supposed to be the Warriors, the Celtics, and everyone else. LeBron left the conference for a young team in LA. The 76ers, while yes to improve, the Celtics have their number. The Bucks, we just beat them. The Raptors got Kawhi, cool, but we're still better. However, as the season played out, it just became abundantly clear that this team had too many egos and too many players that needed and wanted the ball in their hands to be effective. And while a majority of the blame was put on one Kyrie Irving for being a toxic teammate, a terrible leader, the problem was way more than just Kyrie. There was a problem with the personnel on the team, and it all ended in a grand collapse against the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round. So then 2020 comes around and Danny Ainge tries the less is more approach and fails. Kyrie Irving leaves for Brooklyn, Al Horford signs with the Philadelphia 76ers, Terry Rozier and Marcus Morris leave as well, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to give Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown the full keys to the team then and there. But then, the Celtics essentially used up a majority if not all of their cap space to sign Kemba Walker to a max contract. And the 2020 Boston Celtics were essentially supposed to be what the 2019 Celtics were supposed to be. Take the 2019 Celtics, lessen the number of shot creators on the team, sign Kyrie without the toxicity because apparently that's how good Kemba Walker is, and let's just run it back. This should work, and while yes, the Boston Celtics did get better this season both record-wise and just visibly as well, and yes, they did make the Eastern Conference. The reason this team lost to the Heat was because of Kemba Walker's deficiencies on the defensive end, a lack of bench, and a lack of rim protection because Bam cooked the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. All issues that could have been fixed if Danny Ainge used the money he spent on Kemba Walker on trying to get quality bigs, better bench players that accepted their roles better, and just started Marcus Smart. But Danny Ainge was so hell-bent on finding a Kyrie replacement that he just went for the next best thing. So now here we are in 2021, and from the 2019 Celtics, Gordon Hayward is gone, Kyrie Irving is gone, Al Horford is gone, Terry Rozier is gone, and Marcus Morris is gone. Gordon Hayward signed with Kemba Walker's former team and is playing like the Gordon Hayward Celtics fans have dreamed for since day one. Terry Rozier is on the same team Gordon Hayward is on, the Charlotte Hornets, and is thriving as well and is playing better than the guy the Celtics didn't want to re-sign him for. The Celtics went from one of the deepest teams the game has ever seen to a team with no bench. And it is the Brooklyn Nets, out of all teams, that have the NBA's premier super team. It's honestly all poetic at this point. The Boston Celtics were supposed to be the team up after the Warriors, and they just simply haven't been that. And the team that's looking like is set up to be that next dominant team is the Brooklyn Nets with Kyrie Irving. I guess Danny Ainge just didn't play his cards right. Watch this video on your screen where I talk about LaMelo Ball and why I think he represents the future of NBA basketball. But with that being said, I am out. Peace.